Hi guys, it's Alex from Growing Goodings, and I'm here to chat about eating disorders. This week is National Eating Disorder Awareness Week, and they do that every single year, and I have been quite diligent in posting about it and advocating for the awareness of eating disorders and what it looks like since forever I've been in recovery. So that is what today's chat is going to be about, eating disorders. If you're popping in, go ahead and tell me where you're checking in from. I'd love to say hello, and then I will get started on our chat today. Okay? Awesome. All right, so I want to kind of give a background. I am 31 years old right now. I turned 32 this year, and my eating disorder was diagnosed at 14 years old, and it started at 12 years old. And so some background on that. My dad molested me as a child at 12, and that trauma really obviously broke my world into pieces. And one of the ways that I was coping with that was through the control of what I was eating and how much I was eating. And it's so hard to talk about, especially like live, but it was really, really rough. And it started really slowly and progressively got worse. And oh my gosh, I totally forgot my questions that you guys wrote. But hold on, let me go grab it. So I will chat before and then I'll come back. Why do you need me?
He was mad at me.
Okay, well, I'm on a live video. Everyone can say hi to you. Okay, study your verses, please. Close the hall door.
Got it.
Now everyone got to see Emberly and Ava. They fight over everything. Ava got mad at her over something about verses because they're studying their Bible verses for tonight, and it's all wonderful. Okay. Trying to pull myself together. I get really emotional when NEDA week comes up, when National Eating Disorder Awareness Week comes up, because I hate using the word triggering, but it's a little triggering for me because I do get very like overwhelmed by what I have gone through in my life, especially in relation to my eating disorder, and then really emotional now because in my postpartum life that I am in, I am personally struggling a little bit with eating stuff and weight stuff. So again, background, starting over. Trauma happened at 12, and then from there progressively got worse. And it was when I was 14. My parents were separated, and I lived with my dad. Yes, don't ask why. It's so backwards and obviously really fed into my trauma. No pun intended using the word fed. But I was 14, almost 15, and was 90 pounds, and I'm 5'9", and nobody noticed, and it didn't seem like anyone cared. And I was actually the one that advocated for help. I still remember the day I was in dance at high school in California, and I ended up just like going to the office and telling them that I needed to call my dad. I had a cell phone, but I don't know why I did this. And I told my dad that I needed help and that I think I had an eating disorder. And from there, my dad like took me to this like outpatient program, and they evaluated me, and they said that I was too sick and I had to go inpatient in the hospital. And so I spent 2.5 months in the hospital. And I had a feeding tube and all of that, and I had like a patient care attendant that would have to sit in my room with me, because like when you're on like a mental health, behavioral health ward, you have to like be monitored the whole time. And so I did that, and I didn't talk to anybody for the first month and a half. So hard to think about now, but like I had like shut down that much. And then that doctor that admitted me to the hospital, he would come every single day, and he like had a journal that he gave me, and he would just wait till like, basically he was starting therapy in the hospital when I was inpatient before going to his outpatient program. And it took a month and a half for me to actually talk verbally to this psychiatrist. And eventually I ended up out of the hospital, and I went to this outpatient program and did a lot of like faking it until I graduated. And then basically the cycle continued all the way until I was 18, and my dad kicked me off his insurance, and I was just really sick. So my eating disorder could have killed me many times, because all in that time period too, there was a lot of overdosing, and like what I would talk about of like trying to, just didn't want to like think about things anymore, just wanted it to be numb and take a break from my brain. And so eating disorders are really, really life-threatening in that way, because even if you are getting treatment, if like the person is not wanting to get treatment, then it's not going to work. So my eating disorder was really severe. It was anorexia nervosa, subtype binge purge. So basically it was very restricting, and then it focused on binging, where most people know what binging is, but like where you just eat a whole bunch of food uncontrollably, and then purging, which is throwing it up. And so that was my diagnosis at 14, was that. And I really struggled with that really all the way up until my 20s, in different aspects. So I did post on Instagram a question box of questions that you maybe have about eating disorders, and some of you guys put in some really great ones. Someone asked, what are signs that I would look for in my children if they were starting to show signs for an eating disorder? And I think one of the main things for me was the isolating. I like wanted to be isolated from everybody, and it was odd because every time I was like in person with people, I would be like, oh my gosh, like I want to cook this, like I want to do that. Like I got really into cooking in my eating disorder, and would make like a whole bunch of really crazy foods that were really good, like for a teenager to make, and then I wouldn't eat them. Or I would be like, oh, I already ate before I got to school, or by the time my dad would get home, I'd be like, oh, I already ate right before you got home. And so a lot of that stuff. And I was really active in sports. So I did track and soccer and basketball and dance, and I just did everything. And so like I was always working out, and my dad would always say like that he had no idea, because it just seemed like I was really invested and motivated towards like excelling in the sports. And so like I would like run 10 miles on the treadmill at home on nothing. So when I think about like how it kind of like the tail end where it escalated for me, I think the red flags that I would see are like the avoiding meals, the saying like, oh, I already ate this, when it's like, okay, nobody saw you eat that. The isolating around meal times, and the catch-22 one about like being really into like cooking and stuff is where there's a fine line, because obviously I want to have my kids be involved in like the cooking process to have a healthy relationship with food. But I think that red flag part is like not partaking in the food after it's being cooked. And so like I am, I think, a little hyper aware of things. So like Emberly has sometimes been like, oh, I'm not hungry. Oh, I already ate. When I'm like, you did not already eat. You have to be hungry because you're doing all these activities, or like you can't just not eat breakfast. And Emberly has really like tall, skinny body type, and so I'm already like feeling like I'm hyper aware of that because I just don't want her to be like avoiding food thinking that it's going to make herself feel better. So like I am really aware of that, and I am really aware of like the isolating if they want to be alone. And as we are heading into like the preteen years, I get very worried because there is a 4-year age gap with Emberly, and I feel like with the 4-year age gap, it will naturally kind of isolate her from her siblings just because there's a big like difference in what they're interested in. So I'm really aware of that, the isolating when they say they're eating or not eating, and like the red flags with cooking about not like actually eating what they've made. I already answered how long it took me to realize it was out of control. It took about 2 years, 2.5 years to kind of get to that, oh my gosh, I'm going to die point for the first time. But it wasn't until I was pregnant with Emberly that really like I knew I needed to like stop so that I could take care of her. But then I relapsed again in between Ava and Hannah and Heidi, where I got really, really thin again and like really struggled with food. But that's like a roller coaster of eating disorders. What do you do when someone just won't eat on a school trip? Oh, wow. 10 days is a really long time to not eat. And like, so when I was a teen, there were like certain websites that were like all about anorexia, and like people would like do fasting challenges together. And I just remember like doing those and like crossing off the hours as I completed the fasting hours just to like see how many hours I could fast. I think 10 days is a really serious problem. And if it was not my kid, I would immediately reach out to the parents and express my concern. And it says a school trip, so I don't know if it's like public school or private school, but I would report it to a counselor, a guidance counselor, and really start getting people involved. It may not work, but I don't think I would be able to have that on my conscience, as I didn't do anything if I noticed a student not eating for 10 days on a trip. It's so dangerous. It's so scary. And those are one of those things where it's like, especially teens, like when they're on these kind of trips and they're obviously not around their parents, it's much easier for them to be like, oh yeah, I'm not eating, like, or I'm going to restrict my eating. So if you're noticing it, those are red flags. Please tell somebody, let a counselor know, let a parent know. You need to make sure that you have done your due diligence to let them know, because even though you may not be able to like convince this kid, their parents hopefully can step in and help too. What was a key thing that helped you in the right track? Oh, so I said this, having Emberly really made all the difference, but it really was a choice of wanting to get better, because if you don't want to get better, you can just pretend and make other people think you're getting better and then not get better. And that literally was me like all the way into my 20s, was just like appearing to be better, but not being better. And like the appearing to be better sometimes doesn't seem outward, like just because someone is at a normal, healthier weight doesn't mean that they're better, okay? Because eating disorders, it's a mental illness that manifests outward. It can be like really easy to deceive somebody and be like, oh yeah, I'm totally better, and then not be better. So I had to really want that. They like, when I was a teen, I was like told to get on antidepressants, and I refused to get on antidepressants, and I was inpatient at several places and was supposed to be on antidepressants, and I did what almost every eating disordered person that doesn't want to get better does, and that's you cheek your medicine and you don't take it. And so it's like you have to really want to get better. And that's really sad because sometimes it takes you to the brink of death to get to that point. Someone, wasn't a question, but they said, is it wise not to talk about food, weight, clothes, or is giving compliments okay for your daughter? So I try not to talk about weight, which is really hard because I personally am struggling with weight. I try not to talk about food outside of its nutritional value. And this is really hard because Matt and I obviously have different backgrounds in this. And Matt's brain is very like, yeah, just eat less and you will lose weight, Alex. And I'm like, I cannot go on that mindset, and I don't want my kids seeing that. Matt will do intermittent fasting, but I know that I cannot do that. So I try to, like, anytime we talk about food, we talk about the experience of the food in the sense of like what it tastes like, or like seasoning, or like the health benefits or stuff like that, and try to like be somewhat conversational during a meal. Because when I was really sick, if I was not like convinced that it was good for me, then I wouldn't, there was no like logical connection. And I do see that in Emberly, where she does really well when she's anxious about stuff, like especially in ballet, when her ballet instructor kind of talks about the biomechanics of dancing and her body and like how things work together. And so that is kind of how I've taken the approach of food, the benefits of the food and stuff, but then also the experience of like enjoying food, because I want her to know that like you can sit down and enjoy a meal, because I did not learn that you could like sitting down to enjoy a meal until I was in my 20s, and that's pretty crazy. So we have been trying to instill that, and instill that the food is like something that gives us nutrition and fuel so that we can do fun stuff like ballet. I mean, we still give compliments on like cute outfits and stuff, but I don't think we've ever like had that issue yet. But Emberly's only 10, almost 11, so I'm not really sure how that goes. But I do think that like there is a fine line. I've noticed this fine line of like modesty, because I do think it's important to be modest, of not having like the modesty be a shaming aspect, but more like glorifying God. So I'm still walking through that of like, how do I convey that to my children, my daughters especially, that like modesty is not about shaming our bodies, it's about glorifying God. How did you get treatment, residential or outpatient? So I was really sick a lot. And I often would get to the point of like, I will die if someone does not pay attention to where I'm at. And so on numerous occasions, I was the one that was like, I need help. Like someone needs to send me somewhere, do something with me, take me somewhere to my parents to help me so I don't die. I think that's kind of like off. I don't think, in my experience, I don't think that there's a lot of people that are really sick that go asking for help. I think it turns into the opposite. Well, I take that back because I do have some friends in the eating disorder community as adults that still are struggling and are in and out of treatment centers. But every single time that I had gone for help, it was at my own, like, please somebody help me, otherwise I'm going to die here today. And that's really scary, being the teenager that is like stuck mentally and physically in this rut and having to seek out your parents to be like, can you please take care of me because I will die. And watch, YouTube's going to be like censoring this whole thing because I probably said the word die way too many times. Do I find Instagram nutrition advice triggering at all? Yes. 100%. 100%. I think it is a very, very scary fine line on Instagram nutrition and like the black and white thinking and the projecting of nutrition on the internet. I think it's terrifying. And that is one of the reasons why, like, I will not let Emberly go on social media right now. She's just a child. She's not able to like filter through that. I already know that it is bothersome to me. I don't follow nutrition accounts. It's too triggering for me. I don't want to sit there and start being like, okay, I really shouldn't eat that. And because in my brain, when it looks at those things, it's like, okay, then don't ever eat it ever again. And like, if you do eat it, then you've failed at it. And if you failed, then what's the point of doing anything? And so you can see it's like very pendulum swinging, and that eating disorder like thought process still lives in me. It's just a matter of like whether or not I'm choosing to listen to it. Is it a quiet thing or is it a louder voice? Does that make sense? So yeah, I don't follow any of those. What else? How can I encourage a friend that has been to treatment multiple times and still needs help? I mean, you just keep showing up and keep being a friend. It's such a trite thing to say, right? To just like keep being a friend and keep like checking in on them. But really, I have found that it is literally up to the person who is struggling with their eating disorder to want to get better. And when we want to get better, we find the ways to get better. And then more often than not, we do get better if we want it. It's when we don't want it that it's really, really scary. And like for me, the only thing that saved me was literally Emberly. Having Emberly saved my life because it stopped me from restricting and it stopped me from spiraling into depression and suicidal thoughts. And that is the only thing that really stopped me. My kids were the thing that stopped me. So I don't obviously have 100% clear answer, but I think the main thing is you have to want to get better. But I think if you want to get better, the likelihood of you living in recovery is totally possible. All right, and let me answer one more. What's helpful and not helpful? What is helpful and not helpful to say to somebody struggling? I mean, the not helpful things are super obvious. Like, don't comment on how they look. Another thing not helpful is like, don't like, and this is a hard one because I think like naturally, especially girls, like females, women, we want to like relate to each other. And so we say, oh yeah, I totally get that. One time this happened to me, or this experience that's kind of related, kind of similar. And we want to like relate in conversation, where unless you like actually have an eating disorder, please don't like sit there and be like, oh yeah, I totally get that. Like sometimes I totally binge on blah, blah, blah when I watch Netflix. And it's like, okay, but okay. Like, I think we all do that as humans, but like, are you doing it because of the mental aspect of it? Like, is there a deeper thing to that, or are you just bored and you're eating and watching Netflix? Because there's a difference between binging and like, I'm not kidding. I will tell you one story about binging that is night and day different between someone who is vegging out on their couch watching Netflix and somebody with like an actual eating disorder of binging. When I was like 17, I still have the scar from it. When I was 17, I went on a binging spree and it's so crazy because like when I would binge, it would be like the whole world blacks out and I couldn't find a can opener to open a can of something. I don't even know what it was a can of. I took it was like this like mini hatchet kind of knife that my mom had, and I went and I tried to open the can with this little hatchet thing, and I sliced my finger all the way across, okay, during my binge, and I like wrapped it up in paper towels and was squeezing it and went into the shower to purge, okay, purged, held my finger that was gushing blood and got out of the shower, and it had not stopped and it was bleeding so much I had to go and get stitches. Like my binge was that like intense and I needed to purge before I could take care of like this injury. And I still have, it is a literal scar from fingernail side on one side all the way to the other. That is binging. That is what binging is. It's not the same as Netflix. It's not the same as just eating a bag of potato chips while you're watching a TV show. That is not binging. So don't do that. Don't like try to be like understanding by trying to relate to them, to relate to someone with an eating disorder, unless you actually have one, because that can kind of, it can feel like what your mental illness is, that it's being diminished and it's really not a big deal, when it's like, I could die from it. Does that make sense? And then helpful things. I don't think I've ever heard anything super helpful. Not being mean or anything, just there's not really anything helpful you can say to someone that is sick with an eating disorder, because it's just kind of crappy. It kind of stinks. So just don't say dumb things if you really don't understand. If you want to like say something, you could just listen. I feel like that's so trite, because like everyone says, yeah, just listen. And it's like, but it's so true, because sometimes for me, it was just like, does anyone care to listen? Did anyone want to listen to me in all of my things? Because often it wasn't the food, it was the underneath that, like the emotional aspect of it. So that is my last question. This is a lot of rambling. This week is really important to me. Eating disorders are a real illness. They are not a choice. They are something that can kill people. It can change family dynamics. I obviously have experienced it for a decade, 2 decades now, and it is rough. So if you know someone, show them you care. If it's a child, contact somebody. Like if anything comes up with my girls or my boys, I will be in therapy immediately, because it's that terrifying. Like how in the world my parents like went through that, I have no idea. But yeah, so eating disorders, crazy. And like I said, I am in recovery right now. It has been really hard, this postpartum. I am trying not to focus on my weight, but I am focusing on my weight lately, because I gained I gained weight through pregnancy loss and didn't lose it for Claire. And then I typically gain a lot of weight in pregnancy. And I have not lost anything since the hospital. And so my mental state, in addition to my anxiety, has been really hard. And so I am navigating that. I am not relapsed, which I am proud to say. I'm still eating 3 meals a day. I'm still drinking water. I'm still trying to figure out what is working for me. I'm still praying about my body image and praying my gratitude that my body still is like functioning. I'm very grateful for that. But I am like in it, but I wouldn't say I'm not in recovery. So eating disorders are lifelong. And yeah, I just hope that nobody ever has to experience it. But there's my rambling nonsense mess of eating disorders. Sorry that it wasn't as super concise. I just realized that like I don't really talk a ton verbally about my eating disorder anymore because it kind of gets me choked up. Just because it's crazy and it really changed my life. So there you go. Thanks for popping in, everybody. Talk to you soon.